What's going on, everybody? I am the proud owner of a DJI Mavic Pro. I've been using it for about 3 months now, and I have some great tips to share with you. So I just want to start off this video by saying that what I'm sharing with you right now is still kind of a work in progress for me. I'm still learning, but I can get to the point now where I feel like I'm pretty comfortable flying my drone on a daily basis, as well as coming back, getting on the computer, and getting really great footage that I can work with. And I want to kind of share those things that I've learned with you today. And it's basically going to be broken down into 3 parts. First part is getting your settings correct on your DJI Mavic to get that nice clean footage. The second part is going to be using the best footage that you shot as far as getting the camera movements right. You don't want any jerky footage at all. We don't want to have any floppy footage. We want to have nice smooth footage. And then the third part is getting it on the program and getting it color corrected and getting the right music behind it to just really create that nice cinematic look that everybody's looking to achieve. When I first got the drone, I completely ignored all the smart flying functions. I didn't use the follow me. I didn't use the circle. I learned everything. I wanted to get out there and I wanted to learn how to fly manually. And before I worried about really getting the settings and the camera part right, I wanted to focus more on getting comfortable flying with it, because truthfully the biggest thing that I had to learn flying a drone is that it can be a challenge when you're kind of multitask between flying a drone, making sure you're flying safe, and getting great footage at the same time. So I wanted to make sure I was comfortable flying the drone before I really focused in on the monitor and getting the best footage. And I would suggest that you do the same thing. As far as the physical aspects of flying your Mavic, there's one thing I will say that needs to happen, and I see a lot of people doing this. They fly with this protective dome on. To me, the dome, the only purpose for the dome is to protect the gimbal and the camera while you're have it packed away and you're transporting it. As far as actually going out and shooting, I say take the dome off, because I see a lot of people fly these with the dome on, and what happens is you get a lot of glare through this plastic, and you just don't, it's not nice clear footage. So the first thing you can do, if you haven't done it already, is please take the this plastic piece off and just keep it on there when you're using that to transport. Don't worry about filming with it on there. Invest in a good set of ND filters, because what happens is with the Mavic, you have if you know anything about photography, you know that how you adjust your exposure. You have 3 methods of adjusting exposure: your shutter settings, your shutter speed, your sensitivity or your ISO, or your aperture, your f-stop, whatever you want to call it, which basically controls how wide and how closed the actual lens is. The problem is with the Mavic is that you have a fixed aperture camera on this, which means that you can't control the light source by opening and closing the lens more. You have to control it either through ISO, or you have to control it through your shutter speed. Now, a lot of times people are controlling it with shutter speed, and what happens is when you run up a 300 or 400 shutter speed, you're going to get really jittery looking footage. It's going to be very choppy. And when you do like cinematic footage, you really don't want to have you want to have a little bit of blur to your footage. So you want to keep that shutter speed down. And basically how you do that with any DJI drone is you get these things called ND filters. And they're just a little tiny filter. And basically what you do is you just slide them on the front of your camera. And they're basically just like a pair of sunglasses for your lens. And what that allows is it controls the light that comes into the camera. So therefore, if you're letting less light in through one of these ND filters, then that's less time you have to worry about adjusting your shutter speed and your ISO. This set I actually got right here is the Polar Pro Cinema Series. I think I paid about $70 for them. But they come in 3 different strengths. You have I believe it's a 16, a 10, and a 6. Now the 16, the darkest one, is what I'm going to use to fly like on bright sunny days, mid-afternoon days, where the sun could be really a killer. And I'll just step it down from there. Typically afternoon or morning, I'll fly with the middle one, which is the 10, I believe. Let me double check here. And it'll say it on there. That's actually an 8. My bad. It's actually an 8. It's a 16-8 and a 4. And then the last one, the smallest one, the one that'll let in the most light, I'll typically fly during like what we call magic hour, right before the sun comes down, because it'll just control it enough. It'll just to let enough light in, but you're not gonna have dark footage. And the only time that I really fly without one of these is actually after the sun's gone down. I will say this: I'm still in the process of trying to figure out how to shoot good nighttime footage with the drone. Now, I haven't really worked with it yet, but that's one thing that I'm working on now, and I will be bringing a future video about this. But let's get into the specifics. Alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm basically just going to go over my video settings that I have set for my Mavic Pro. What you're going to do is you want to go in down here and click this button, and this is where you're going to come up with your actual video settings yet. Now, I try to keep my ISO 800 and below. Most of the times when I'm flying outside during the day, I'm going to keep that at 100. And like I said, I use these ND filters. They're made from Polar Pro. They make a big difference. Basically, they allow you to keep your shutter speed within a reasonable margin. Because the one thing with a fixed aperture drone is that you can't really to do the correct exposure, rather than opening and closing your shutter. You basically can only control it by the shutter speed as well as the sensitivity of the image. Properly expose your image, you're going to have to adjust your shutter speed, which is basically this toggle down here. And once you get into these higher numbers, these 300s, these 400s, you're going to get really choppy looking images. You know, when you shoot like action photography and videography, you shoot at a higher shutter speed because you want to capture a moment without any motion blur. Well, in actual, if you're looking for cinematic footage, if you're looking to actually shoot cinematic type footage, you want a little bit of motion blur, so you need to keep that shutter speed down a little bit. So I usually don't shoot at any shutter speed higher than 100. Usually 120 is the maximum. Alright, so once you set your exposure via your ISO as well as your shutter speed, you can go to this button right here, and this is basically going to be your actual video settings. I usually always shoot in 4K at 24 frames a second, just because it matches my other footage, as well as I just prefer a 24 frames per second. That's more in what they call the film look. So this is basically going to be your image sizes that you want to shoot. And what we get down here, MP4 is the video format I use because I shoot and I edit on PC. Now if you're editing on a Mac or Apple or something like that, you would probably choose the MOV video format. NTSC is always going to be set to that. If you know anything about broadcast, NTSC is United States American standards of broadcast. PAL is European. White balance, I'm always using going to always set your white balance. I usually use one of the presets for the most part, because when I'm shooting outside, it's usually always going to be sunny or cloudy. I'm not usually shooting inside with fluorescence or anything like that. So just set your white balance for what you think is going to be. And don't ever set it to auto, because you don't want it to switch mid-shot and it'll mess your colors up like crazy, and it'll be a lot of work for you to fix in post. So set your white balance for the type of day you're shooting in. Now this right here, this is where you're going to get into your actual settings at. Generally when it comes to those settings, you don't want to rely on the in-camera processor to get your colors and your sharpness and things like that. So what we do normally is we knock those things down. So we want to knock these settings down to -3, -3. Now the sharpening seems to be a thing of debate lately between DJI Mavic Pro users. It was originally recommended that you keep that sharpening at -1 or 0. I actually just started recently shooting in +1, and I'm going to show you that when we get into the actual footage on the computer, and you'll be able to see a big difference, and that's why I'm actually shooting at +1 when it comes to my sharpening now. So once you have those video settings all ready to go, you can just go ahead and click out of there. Now I'm inside right now, so obviously I'm not going to be flying, but I will say this. One thing that's gotten me quite a few times, and you'll see right here, is the push to focus. And you want to always make sure that you have that set before you start recording, because I'm going to show you right here. You're going to see wherever I push at on the screen is where the camera is going to focus to. Now it's focused to this wall in the back, and the actual keyboard is out of focus. Now if I push in the keyboard, it's going to take a little while because it's pretty close. Now it's set. Now the keyboard's in focus, and the wall and back is out of focus. Now when you're shooting outside and shooting wider shots, you don't necessarily have to worry about a certain thing being in focus when you're shooting up high. But one thing I will say is, I always kind of push the focus in the center of the image, or like say if I'm flying and there's buildings close to me and there's mountains behind, I will focus on the buildings and leave the mountains out of focus. If I'm shooting landscape, I'll make sure the trees below me are in focus rather than things that are far away. So it's just something you need to really be mindful of, because there's been a lot of times, especially when you're out shooting during the day and it's sunny and you have a glare on your monitor here, and I've actually gotten back and things looked in focus, but when you actually see them on the computer, they're out of focus. And you know, once you have an out of focus image, there's nothing you can do with that. So always make sure that you set your push to focus to what you be focused on before you hit the record button, and always monitor that too. So like say like if you want to have the camera pan down and you want to do like a bird's eye view shot versus panning the camera up, anytime you switch your camera angle or switch your distance, always make sure you hit that push to focus button. Okay, now we're to actually have our footage shot. We're actually going to in the program right now, and this video that I just shot of Sale in Virginia is actually going to be a really good example of everything that I'm talking about as far as what I've learned in my different times taking my drone out and getting footage. And you can see footage that I got like maybe a month and a half ago versus footage that I got just within the last 2 weeks. The first thing I'm going to focus on when we're talking about getting cinematic type footage is we want to have nice smooth movement as far as the camera goes. And I'm going to show you now. I'm going to play this here, and you're going to see it's a very nice smooth moving shot. It's very then you can see right there how it's switched. So right there would be a nice shot that we could use. Now when we had the camera movement there, we'd actually want to chop that out, and it just simply moves to another angle. Now you can see there's a very smooth, deliberate motion right here, and this is what you want to use to actually get better looking images, because you don't really want, I see a lot of people post stuff on YouTube and they'll have, you know, this movement right there, that just does not look good at all. You want to, when you actually go to edit your footage, you want to chop any sudden jerky movement out. Now actually, you know, when I go out and fly, a lot of times I'll just hit the record button and just start flying around. I won't usually stop and start recording while I'm actually flying around getting what I need to get. So I'm gonna have parts here where you're gonna see movement going on. Now that's not actually that bad of a shot, because you can see it's very subtle and deliberate. There's nothing jerky about it. So it's a very nice little transition from the buildings down there into the field up here. And now I'm going to show you, there's going to be another, right there's another jerky motions. We want to chop all those out. Now once the camera, I settle on what I want to go after, this is where I would actually want to use this clip. And you'll see it's a nice deliberate motion. We have a nice and one thing that another thing I'll say is as far as motion, reveals and circle shots, we call, well, I can call them panning shots, circle shots, whatever you want to call them. Reveal and circle and panning shots are probably like the two biggest things you can use as far as movement when you're shooting your drone footage. And this is kind of a reveal shot right here. We're moving in slowly. As we get closer to the building, I'm actually going to lift up with the drone and get more altitude. And as I lift up and get closer, it's going to reveal all this stuff behind it. It's just a way of enticing the viewer and just building anticipation for the shot. You're going to see a lot of cinematic shots where they do reveals like that, just to kind of set the story, because it basically this drone footage is basically to set a story and set the setting for the story. The story is not necessarily going to be the drone footage itself, so you want to say, like, if we're doing a film or a video about this facility right here, this would be a good way to set it up, because it gets you perspective on what you have going on around you. Now you're going to see, once I get up and get to a certain point, I'm going to have another jerky shot right here. I'm going to move around now. See, that's too quick. And this is basically me flying and positioning myself. Now once I position myself, we have a nice slow, deliberate motion again. And you can see it's very I'm actually flying right into the sun, which actually you'll see right here, it gives a nice little you get a little tiny lens flare on the lens itself, as well as you get this nice shiny looking glossy effect on everything that's below it. So see, there's another reveal shot. It's revealing the stadium. And now we're going to do a pan. And it's nice, like I said, nice smooth motion is what you're looking for when you're looking to create these images. So what I would say is you need to focus on a shot you want to do and commit to it. Don't be all herky-jerky, you know, while you're trying to figure out what you want to do. And this is the next shot here. This is a what they call an orbital shot, I guess you can call it. And you can see it's like I'm panning right to left, and in the meantime I'm also tilting the drone. So it's just another reveal shot. It's showing the actual landscape all around it. Now there's a jerky motion at the end there, so we won't use that, but you can see there's a nice slow, deliberate motion here. And this is just a matter of getting the drone out and learning how to use the controls. Like I said, I focused more on flying the drone and get comfortable with flying the drone before I worried about getting all my video settings correct. So that was a good, helpful start for me, to the point now where I'm kind of comfortable with my drone movements, so now I can focus more on getting these shots. So there's a nice orbit shot right there. Another nice cinematic shot is going to be where you move up to down, like, and that's just another reveal shot. Like right here, I'm just going to basically just go straight up with my drone, and it just reveals a little bit. Like I said, it's another form of a reveal. Now I'm going to get into my orbiting shot, and you can see there's actually a bird flying. I got a bird right there. Look at that. Another orbiting shot right here, and this is actually going to orbit right around, and we're going to have the sun right there, and you're going to see, you're going to get that nice glow on your objects below the sun. Now I'm going to show you something that I learned, and I talked about this when I was talking about the sharpening setting, and I'm actually going to focus on this here. This is something that I've learned from watching other people do videos, as well as, and this is going to be a perfect example right here. This is actually set to -1 sharpening. Now I'm actually going to zoom this in, and you're going to see right here, we'll go ahead and hand that down. My bad. You're going to see right here, if you look at, you're going to have buildings in focus, but the trees are completely mush. They're completely out of focus. Now what's happening is, when you cut the sharpening down, the Mavic is actually kicking in its automatic noise reduction. And what it's doing with the noise reduction is it's actually making your images blurry. And we'll go ahead and bring that in 75%. So you're going to see incredibly blurry footage right here. And even if I bring it out wide, you're going to see all the trees are mush. And to me, like, when I was flying, like, the trees and the foliage is going to be the ultimate indicator of if your settings are correct on your drone or not. So that was a major problem for me, and I noticed it, and apparently a lot of other people noticed it too. So I actually did a little research, and I come across a video that the guy actually made a good case in point for actually bumping up the sharpening. What happens is, and I'm going to show you, this is with the -1 sharpening, and we're going to get into some newer footage and see. This is +1 sharpening. Now you're going to see a huge difference. Look at those trees. They're not all mushy and out of focus now. You can actually see details in all the trees as well as the buildings. So you're going to see a huge difference here. Look at all the detail and everything. There's detail in everything now. There's no mush anywhere. Now the one drawback of using this method is you're going to see there's going to be noise that's created because the sharpening is kicking in. So what you're going to need to do to combat that is you're going to actually need to get in the footage when you do your final color correction and all that. You want to get in there and actually use a denoiser program to cut out the noise. So it's a workaround process, but to me it's like I would rather have all the detail in the original footage and work with that footage versus get into Edit Bay, get the footage, and have mushy trees. That just, there's no fix for for that problem. There is a fix for the noise problem, and I actually my noise reduction program of choice is actually comes through Magic Bullet. This is actually my finished footage right here. Now you're gonna see it hasn't been color correct. I mean, I actually have the adjustment layer turned off that has all the color correction and everything in it, but I'm actually going to turn that on now, because what happens is when you denoise it, it's really lagging on the processor. So now you're gonna see, and hopefully this will play back. There's my color corrected footage, as well as you're gonna see the noise from the trees is actually pretty much gone now. Now the problem is, see, there's the noise in the trees, and I guess it's gonna lag. Noise from the trees is gone, and using a good quality denoiser is crucial for this. Like I said, I'm losing the noise in the trees, but I'm not losing any detail in the image, and that's basically the gist of it. It's not really complicated. Like I said, once I had the settings figured out as far as getting the right profile, I haven't mentioned it yet, I actually use the DJI profile as far as my colors and stuff. And I'll just show right there. I'm actually going to, and what the DJI does, it basically, I was using log footage, and I actually I'm going to show you some log footage that I have. This is from footage that I shot with actually shooting log. And my one problem is, like, theoretically, when you shoot video footage, you want to shoot log for the most part, because it gives you the most dynamic range. Like you're going to see here, I have information as far as the shadows of the tree as well as the bright sky. Nothing's really blown out at all. So as far as dynamic range, the log profile is actually not bad for the Mavic Pro. The problem I have with it is that because you have such a small sensor size with the Mavic Pro, you lose your colors when you use log, because it's doing a flat profile. With the log profile and the Mavic Pro, it was hard to really bring those colors back. So I ended up really having to work the footage heavily just to get some of these colors back. And in the meantime, because the footage is only so good, you can only do so much correction to it before it starts to fall apart. Now using the DJI, you're going to see I'm retaining a lot more color of everything here, but at the same time I'm still retaining my dynamic range. You're going to lose a tiny bit of dynamic range, but what you keep in the color information is vital. So to me, the DJI is pretty much a good compromise between getting the dynamic range you want as well as retaining the color information. And even with the DJI, by the time I get in here and edit and I color correct it, I really don't have to do that much. All I have to do is maybe bump up the contrast a little bit, mess with the shadows and the highlights, tinker with the exposure a little bit, but for the most part, the color correction process is pretty painless. And I'm actually going to deselect that. And basically you're going to see right here, the only thing I did in this shot is I just bumped up the contrast a little bit and bumped up the shadows. You see the sky and the ground, you have a nice nice dynamic range between these two, so there really wasn't a whole lot of information I needed to do. I mean, a whole lot of correcting I needed to do as far as getting the footage the way I wanted. So there's before and there's after. Now there's whole other tutorials on color correcting, and I'm actually going to probably create another video about that in the future. But this is just a overall general sense of getting good footage and working with good footage, and getting a quality product to work with for your productions. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, this is still a work in progress. I'm still learning every day, and I think you should learn every day. It's always good to try and get better, and I always stress that everybody should always be a student. Nobody should ever be a master, because there's always something that you need to improve on. If you like what you see, if you like the content that you see on this channel, do me a favor, hit that like button. Just leave a comment real quick, what you liked about this video, what you didn't like, what you want to see me shoot with a drone, what questions you have about the drone, and also please subscribe. And I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next one.